All right, welcome back to the VLOG. I'm here with Dookie Betts, the king of Gate City, the king of New England.
That's right.
We're here at the Brook up there. They have a crazy promotion today going on, $1,000 every half hour for the high hands. So I'm gonna go down and sit at the 2-5 tables, see if we can run up a stack. Hopefully this guy will join us and we'll get some good footage for the vlog. Thanks, guys.
We get a seat at a 2-5 table right away. We sit down with $500 to start. We brought $1,000 with us, but we're hoping not to have to use all of it. Let's get off to a hot start and run up a stack. Good luck us. What better hand to get off to a hot start with? Pair of queens. We're gonna raise it up to $15. That was the standard open for this game. The hijack calls, the cutoff calls, and the button is gonna call as well. We're gonna go 4 ways to a flop with $60 in the middle, which is 10-6-6 two-tone. I decided to check. Heads up against the button, we're checking quite a bit, but I think multi-way. Checking range here is probably fine. We don't really want to be inflating pots out of position too much. This also allows us to disguise the strength of our hand and gain some information from the other players. Checks on over to the button who bets out $25. We do some raising heads up, but I think multi-way. Calling is probably fine. And the low jack now wakes up and check raises up to $75. The button thinks about it for a while before ultimately folding, and I think it's a pretty strange spot. Could he have a 6? Maybe a hand like 6-7 suited, 6-5 suited, or ace-6 suited. There's 6 combos of those hands, but there are so many more combos I think he plays of offsuit 10x, like all the offsuit Broadway combos. There are also some flush draws he could be raising. When he only makes it 75, it's not a large raise. Sort of feels like he's trying to find out where he's at with a 10 or by a cheap river with a flush draw. I also think our hand is fairly under-repped when we check the flop. And for those reasons, I decided to stick around, put in the call, and we see a pretty good turn, the 6 of diamonds. This card cuts down on a lot of his 6x combos, so we're feeling pretty comfortable, especially comfortable when he checks it back. The river is the jack of hearts. I think the hijack has 3 major categories of hands here. The first are busted flush draws, which probably aren't going to put any more money in. The second are his 6x combos that beat us. Exclusively, I think 6-7 of clubs, 6-5 of clubs, and ace-6 of clubs. So that's 3 combos that beat us. However, I think he has far more combos of 10x hands, including all the offsuit combos of ace-10, king-10, queen-10, and jack-10. There are 39 total combos that we beat. We decided to target those with a bet of $150. Now the hijack only has $240 left behind, and he's looking to put every cent of it to use as he goes all in. I don't really have a choice but to snap call, and he pretty quickly shows us that we took ourselves to Value Town because he has ace of clubs, 6 of clubs. For the flop trips, turn 4 of a kind, not the warmest of welcomes to the table. We give the 7 seat a full double up, and I have no interest sitting in a 2-5 game with 35 big blinds effective. I decide to reach into the reserves a little earlier than we would have liked and add on. We're now in for $1,000. Our stack is around $700. It's time to go to war. We're gonna pick this next hand up in progress. We have king 10 offsuit in the cutoff. There's a $10 straddle on. We raise it up to 25. The button calls, as does the straddler. We go 3 ways to a flop, which comes out ace queen 10, all clubs. We have a royal flush draw. The straddler checks it over to us. If you look a little bit closer, we actually only have third pair here, so we check and the button checks back as well. On the 5 of spades, straddler checks to us. We need to make this pot bigger for when we inevitably hit our royal flush. I go for $30. Solver likes a slightly larger size. Button takes a while before folding, and the straddler is gonna come along. If you guys could help me out and on the count of 3 hit those like and subscribe buttons for some extra run good for the jack of clubs one time. The river is the 6 of clubs. We don't make our royal flush. For some reason, you guys hitting the like button didn't bring out the jack of clubs. I'll have to call YouTube and check on that. But it is a club, which means we have the nuts. And now it's just a question of how to extract max value from the opponent. In theory, I'm supposed to bet 150% of the pot, but I go a little bit smaller, trying to get called by some lower flushes. I bet out for pot for $140. Unfortunately, he pretty quickly folds. It always feels nice to make the nuts, especially in a straddled pot. I guess we'll have to wait just a little bit longer to get our first royal flush on the vlog. But we can't be too greedy, and we can't be too disappointed when we drag a pot and our stack is going back in the right direction. This next hand, we're opening in middle position to $15 with king jack suited, another chance to make a royal flush. The low jack to our left calls. The cutoff is also going to call before the button decides to squeeze things up to $60. The button is a relatively older gentleman, so I expect him to have a decently tight 3-betting range, but he's been involved in a lot of pots, so probably not an OMC. I'm in the mood to battle. I decide to stick in the call Both the low jack and the cutoff are going to get out of the way. The button and I heads up in a 3-bet pot. And the flop comes out pretty good for our hand. It's King 9-3 rainbow. We have top pair, backdoor straight, and backdoor flush draws. We check it in flow. The button player is going to continue for around half pot. He goes for $80. The button can still have plenty of hands we're ahead of, like pocket tens, pocket jacks, pocket queens, ace queen. Our hand probably has a little bit too much going for it to fold. I call to evaluate a turn. The turn pairs the board. It's the 9 of hearts. We're going to check it in flow, as we will do with all of our range here. And the button pretty much snap checks back. Feeling pretty good about our hand. When the river is the ace of diamonds, I check, maybe with plans of calling a bet of a reasonable size, but the button snap checks back with a pretty surprising hand.
Really?
Didn't see that one coming.
I didn't see that one coming either. It's a pretty light 3-bet from the button, and it seems like the player in the 8 seat would agree.
Looks like a man would have a tight 3-betting range.
A pretty gross river sees this over $300 pot shipped the other way as we continue to struggle to get things going early on. For this next hand, we throw on the $10 straddle and are rewarded with ace king of spades. Remember kids, the poker gods reward those who straddle. There are 3 limps from the middle position player, the low jack, and the button. This is all pretty weak. We're going to be ISOing fairly wide here, except this time we're top of range. We make it $60 to go. The middle position player might know that I might be doing this fairly wide. He's going to put in the call. The low jack is a fellow non-believer. He's also going to stick around. The button comes to his senses a little bit and gets out of the way. We're going 3 ways out of position in a pot that's nearly $200. And we're going to completely whiff on the queen 8-6 board. We're going to check it in flow, which we're going to do with our entire range. The middle position player checks, and the low jack is going to let us see a free turn as well. The turn pairs the board and the 8 of diamonds. I check in flow again, planning on check calling at least 1 bet, but it checks through all the way to the river, which is the 3 of clubs. I don't think that either player can be fairly strong with this line. I also don't think our hand is good enough to win at showdown. I put out a small block bet of $50 to fold out hands like 6x combos, pocket 5s, pocket 4s, pocket deuces, and pocket 7s. As expected, the middle position player isn't all that strong. He folds pretty quickly. The low jack thinks about hero calling, but ultimately decides to let it go as well. This isn't a super interesting pot, but it just shows the importance of fighting over every pot, and how checking your whole range out of position can actually give you a lot of information to steal the pot on later streets. With this pickup, our stack climbs back up over the $700 mark, slowly but surely climbing back to even. At this point, a player wearing this straddle hoodie has joined our table, and obviously he's going to want to throw the straddle on, make the game a little bit bigger. So the table has agreed to make this a 2-5-10 table. We are in the straddle with 10-7 suited. An active young player in the big blind opens it up to $40 when it folds to him. 10-7 suited, if we treat this as a blind v blind hand, is well within our calling range. We call and go heads up in position to a flop against an active player with a pretty wide range, I would assume. And the flop comes out decent for our hand. It's ace deuce 3 with 2 spades. We flop a flush draw. The big blind is going to continue small for $25. I think he has a pretty wide range of hands that we could probably get to fold now, but I kind of want to let him keep bluffing on the turn so that we can get him to fold on the river and take down a larger pot. So we just call. The turn is the jack of clubs, and the big blind now slows down and checks. I think when he checks here, he could either just be pure giving up on his bluffing, or he could have just turned some showdown value with a hand like king jack, queen jack, jack 10. It might be pretty tempting to check back and realize our equity here, but I think he just has a wider range than normal, and I feel pretty good about making his jack X fold by the river if I start a bet now. I go for $60. He pretty quickly folds, so maybe a moot point there, but nevertheless, we're going to take down a $200 pot and move our stack back in the right direction, getting fairly close to even now. For this next hand, the under the gun player has accidentally missed his straddle, so it's not on. Folds to the hijack, who raises up to $15. We have a suited connector in the small blind. We like to mix these into our 3-bet range just to make sure we're nice and balanced. So we make it $50 to go. The big blind player cold calls the 3-bet, and the hijack is going to come along as well. So kind of a weird spot. We're going 3 ways in a 3-bet pot out of position with 150 in the middle, which comes out ace king 3 all diamonds. We completely whiff it. However, I think the big blind, when he cold calls 3 bets, is going to have a lot of medium pairs. which won't like seeing two overcards. And while the hijack player might have some flushes, I think once the big blind cold calls, he'll be continuing with a wider range than normal. So I decide to lead for $55 to target their air hands and their auto folds. I go for a 1/3 size here, because that's the size that I'll be betting on monochrome boards always. We also want to be constructing our bluffing range around hands with equity or that block the nuts, like queens with the queen of diamonds, or with total air. 5-6 of spades here is probably stone bottom of range. I think we do want to still have some airball bluffs, so I bet small. They're both gonna muck. With this, our stack climbs up for the first time today over the $900 mark. We're about one pot from going into the black. The comeback is almost complete. This next hand's a pretty big one. There's a $10 straddle on. The middle position player has raised to $30. I've called in the cutoff, not typically my MO, but the small blind and button are players that I'd like to play pots with. The small blind comes along for the ride, so we're 3 ways to a flop, which comes out 10-5 deuce with 2 spades. We flop the nut flush draw. The small blind checks it in flow. The initial raiser is going to go for a bet here, which kind of seemed like a lazy size to me in game. He picked a half pot size of $50. I think the middle position player is well studied enough to know that he probably wants to be playing big bet or check on this board. So when he goes for $50, it just sort of seems like an in-between size, probably betting with a large portion of his range, including overcards that have missed this flop. We decided to just call with our flush draw, as I think we could still run into overpairs that won't fold. We could probably get his non-pair hands to fold later. When the turn is the deuce of clubs, he decides to slow down and check it over to us. I think when he does this, there'll have plenty of overcard hands like ace king, king queen, ace queen, queen jack that are just sort of shutting down. Or perhaps he has a lower flush draw than ours, or an overpair that doesn't want to get blown off its equity. It's fine here to check back and try and realize on our part, but I think I'd like to start putting pressure on his non-pair hands that beat us like ace king, ace queen, ace jack, as well as start to build a pot against smaller flush draws that we can either cooler when we get there, or that will fold the river but won't put any more money in if we check it back. So we go for $130. This is a larger bet size than we're betting in equilibrium. In game, I felt this player was crafty and might float with a hand like ace king or ace queen to a smaller bet size, so I tried to size up a bit. The middle position player calls here, so I think his range now contains a lot of flush draws and a lot of overpairs. So when the river is the 5 of diamonds and he checks, I think I actually like a check back here, as we're beating all of his missed spades and losing to all the overpairs. However, I've already seen this player make some big folds and wouldn't put it past him to fold a hand like queens or jacks perhaps on this board, so I go for a size of $225. On the surface it might seem a little bit small, but when we hold the ace of spades, we block ace 5 suited, which is mostly what we're trying to represent now for value. Try and get him to fold his overpairs. I don't think if we actually had a hand like ace 5 of spades, we would want to go super big and fold out all his overpairs. There's sometimes a live dynamic where larger bets feel bluffier and players will call down lighter even though they're not getting the right pot odds. So I'm hoping this $225 bet looks a little bit milky. It looks a little bit like I want to call. I think looking back, I'm fine with being unbalanced on this river, where I can just shove here with a bluff and bet small with value, especially against these random players I've never played with before. A little nuance that I would change if I could go back is if I'm going to put out this size bet, I would do it exclusively with red chips. The way the dealer has set out the bet currently, you can barely see the black chip that's underneath the green one, so psychologically it might feel like a smaller bet. Either way, he's in the tank for quite a while. If he finds the fold, we'll be up about $200 for the first time in the session. But with every second he takes, I'm becoming a little bit more concerned that my bet size in the river just wasn't big enough. Find out that it wasn't, because after almost a full 2 minutes, he makes the crying call with ace of hearts, ace of clubs. Really hard for him to fold that hand, especially when he's getting a decent price on the river. Again, exploitatively, I think we should probably just be jamming here as a bluff and going small with our value if we did have a full house. With that, our stack is back below $500. I'm a bit upset with myself for choosing the in-between size and not just giving up on the river or going for it. We're more than a full double up away from the even mark. The game is getting tougher. I decide to rack up, book the loss, and to leave with the chips I still have. So that is going to wrap up our session, guys. We were in for $1,000, out for $400. So not the best of sessions, just couldn't really get anything going. Obviously had the first hand where we lost most of our stack. Had to rebuy early on. It's always tough when that happens. We slowly started to climb up to our even, and then we had kind of the failed bluff attempt with the ace 8 suited. Kind of wish I could have that one back. Obviously easier to play perfectly after the fact when you can look back at the hands. But I felt like I did alright. Table was pretty reggy. A lot of guys who knew each other. I went around all the New England casinos and played a lot of 2-5 regularly, a lot of higher stakes 5-10, 10-25, some of the guys were talking about. So kind of felt like I held my own. Definitely didn't feel out of place. A lot of 3-betting, a lot of 4-betting, a lot of squeezing, a lot of leveling wars between regs going on in this game. Definitely a fun table to be at. But towards the end I got stuck, just didn't feel like I was in a great mindset to play. And also a couple of the fish had left, so it was kind of just regs. Not really the best game to be in. I'm sure that's not normal. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, they had a high hand promotion where they gave away $1,000 every 30 minutes for the high hand in the room. So that drew a lot of action. Pretty proud of myself with how comfortable I'm beginning to feel in these higher stake games, especially when they throw straddles on and things like that. And a lot of card rooms, 2-5 is the highest game they offer. So you're going to get the best players in those games a lot of the time. So have to adapt, can't just wait and catch big punts from whales like you can maybe with the lower stakes games. But the reason you'd like to play at least 2-5, ideally higher, is one, you can make more money if your win rate is the same. But one of the main reasons why you'd like to move up in stakes in live poker is the rake. The rake kind of kills you at lower stake games, kind of takes a big percentage of the pot, whereas the rake in the 2-5 game and the 1-2 game are the same. It won't play as much of a factor the higher you go in stakes. Overall, the Brook was a pretty nice property. Might head back up there again in a future vlog, not quite sure yet. If you stuck around this long, thank you guys so much for watching. You can hit those like and subscribe buttons, it really helps me out a lot. And until next time, good luck at the tables.